rain delay in the history of baseball.
Well, the Phillies had one of those in the World Series. I want only to cut you off. The Phillies had one.
Also, there are a lot of people that like Justin Jefferson, but it's never been a wide receiver award.
Right.
The Vikings would have to have this amazing season where they're in the
Bengals are good. The Browns are supposed to be good. The Bills, you're like, what year is this? Because, you know, the last 20 years, those teams have been terrible. Hey, I'm Jeff Skversky on this episode of Inside The Huddle presented by Sportskeeda. I catch up with NFL Network host Andrew Siciliano. You can catch him weekly on the NFL Network hosting NFL Total Access. You can also see him on NFL Sunday Red Zone Ticket on DirecTV, and during the preseason, he's in the booth calling Los Angeles Rams games. We'll talk about his amazing career, how he got his start, wanted to be a newspaper writer. How did he end up in television? We'll talk all about that. And of course, a lot to get to going on in the NFL. We'll talk Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, perhaps early favorites for NFL MVP. And he's a big Cleveland Browns fan because of his father. We'll talk about all the drama going on in Cleveland with the Browns and the quarterback situation, Deshaun Watson, and everything else in between on this episode of Inside the Huddle, presented by Sportskeeda. Andrew, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Jeff, happy to be here. Sorry it took so long to arrange.
Nobody knows the difference, right? No one watching or listening has any idea the back and forth.
It's been 10 years we've been trying to do this.
Were podcasts invented 10? I don't know if podcasts were a thing 10 years ago. Hey, I'm going to do some radio on the internet. I think people would look at you like you're crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, everyone's got a podcast now.
I know.
I don't, but everyone else does. So I'm happy to be on yours.
And so one of the things I want to ask you, because it happens to me all the time, do people butcher your last name?
Not as much as they used to, but yeah. I mean, if you're in the business or if you've watched the TV, you generally don't. You know, if it's like random customer service person trying to say your name, yeah, then 9 times out of 10 they do.
Right.
Sometimes you'd be surprised and they nail it. I like to say that it's pretty self-explanatory. If you've ever taken a Romance language, a Latin language, it's, you know, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, even French. I mean, it's pretty much phonetic, just sound it out. But I think people look at it and they freak out and they see 9 letters and all these vowels and they just panic and they just make something up.
And what are they making up? What do you get?
Siciliano a lot. Cicilino.
Cicilino?
Well, when you say Cicilino, you're clearly not trying. Like, you haven't attempted to sound it out. You just see the letters and imagine what you want it to be in your head. The issue, though, is that even within my family, some people say it differently. In perfect Italian, it would be like Siciliano.
That can't come out of my mouth.
It's not that. It's Siciliano. My dad would say Siciliano. His sister says Siciliano. Different emphasis.
So how do you like it to be said?
I say Siciliano. That's just fine. The only thing I don't want is anyone to ever call me Andy. That I can't stand. Like, Jeff, you could stand 5 feet away from me and yell Andy, and I won't answer. And it's not that I'm trying to like give you the cold shoulder. I won't even hear it. It would be like if someone stood near you and yelled Bob. Your name's not Bob.
Right.
So you don't, there's no trigger to respond to it.
Right.
Like if someone says Andy, I honestly don't know that name.
Right. Well, the worst is when someone goes, "Hey, Jeff," and I turn around and they're not talking to me. They're talking to the guy next to me who happens to also have the name Jeff, and then you're a little embarrassed.
Yeah,
you know?
And it was awkward in the Rams preseason booth this year. It was me and Mina Kimes, and we worked a couple of years, and then we added Andrew Whitworth this year. Most people call him Whit. That's what I call him. Everyone just calls him Whit. No one calls him Andrew. Mina would always call him Andrew in the booth, and so there were some times where she would say, and then Andrew, I'd be like, is it me? Or, oh, body language. I could tell she's looking at him. Okay, good. You know.
So people identify you as an NFL Network host, but you got your start doing radio. How did you get your start? Did it start at Syracuse University, or were you doing this stuff in high school?
No, I never. The idea of sports talk radio in high school seemed pretty comical. I grew up outside DC. There was a guy named Ken Beatrice then on WMAL. They used to do sports talk, and I would listen. I called in one night too, and then hung up when he went to me because I was so nervous. I'm not going, and I hung up. But I went to Syracuse actually to be a writer at first. So I newspaper might be the way I could break into the business, because I never imagined talking for a living or doing television or radio. I was a pretty shy kid, and that was just ridiculous. Being on TV or radio was like, you might as well say I was going to be an astronaut. It seemed as far-fetched.
Yeah.
I went to Syracuse to be a newspaper writer. I actually started that at first, or at least get into some kind of journalism or writing. That's what I wanted to do. But then I started doing radio my freshman year, and it kind of felt right. And I eventually switched my major to the broadcast side. But I never, ever envisioned being on television, even at that point. So I did a lot of, football, basketball, lacrosse, play-by-play in college on WAER, which was kind of like our fraternity there at Syracuse. And then from there, was very fortunate. Got hired to be a radio reporter at what was then WMAQ Radio in Chicago. This 670, it eventually switched over to the Score. The CBS consolidated and got rid of MAQ. But I did that as right out of school. And then that station got the Bears. So I kind of got into the NFL world a little bit, and then moved to LA when Fox Sports Radio started up in 2000. And then after a couple of years at FSR, I was there 9 years at FSR, but after a couple of years at FSR, I kind of weaseled my way into the TV side of things at Fox, and then did both for a while.
So when you think back to those high school times, you're going, okay, I want to go to Syracuse, and what you're writing for, the Daily Orange, is that what it is?
I think I had 3 bylines as a freshman for the Daily Orange.
Okay. So when you go back to that point to now think of where you're at now as a main anchor per se at the NFL Network, one of these elite jobs, do you have moments still? I know you get lost in the job, but do you have moments where you go, what am I doing here?
Yeah, of course. I think we all do. I think first and foremost, we're all fortunate to be able to talk about something and be close to something that we love. We're all football fans. We're all sports fans. This is why, we grew up as kids.
Sure.
My athletic career tapped out pretty early in high school as a second baseman. So, there goes my chance of being a professional athlete. That was long gone. And I realized that in my teenage years. But to be able to do this, yeah, of course. Every day you have a bad day, and we all have plenty of them, because our jobs are just like any other job. Like you might want to scream at a coworker or yell at your boss, or come home and this didn't go right and that didn't go right. We all go through the same daily stress. You got to step back and realize I'm talking about football for a living.
Right.
Shut up. There are worse things that you can do. But I get the most enjoyment out of being able to share it with family and friends. Like my brother took his 7-year-old to his first NFL game 2 weeks ago.
That's awesome.
And to be able to take him, to be able to call in a favor, and he could take his son down onto the field pregame, right, and he could stand there and he could experience that. See the look on his face when my brother sends me a picture. That to me is the coolest part of it now. And yes, I still get the fanboy moments on my own, and it's still every year at the Super Bowl when the Jets go over for the national anthem, I get chills.
Sure.
And say to myself, gosh, I'm a lucky guy. I get those moments plenty, but to be able to share them with friends and family, those are the coolest moments at this point.
Yeah, no, you do have moments. I remember during the Eagles Super Bowl parade, I grew up in suburban Philadelphia, a big Eagles fan, and I'm sitting there on the Parkway in Philadelphia in front of the Art Museum, and there are, a million fans that had been dying to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl. And it's like a concert. It's like a rock concert, just people around you just going nuts. And to feel that energy, it means more to a lot of people than just football. And you talk to people that are Packers fans or any of these legendary franchises, and to those families, I don't want to call it life or death, but it's how they identify with their fathers or their grandfathers or their grandparents.
That's how we're all sports fans, right? We all get it from your family growing up. Most of us do, at least. I know I did.
Right.
Yes, and so to be able to share those moments or see like in 2016. So my dad's from Cleveland. In 2016, I was able to get him to Game 6 of the World Series, where they could have and should have beaten the Cubs that night, and then they could have beaten them in Game 7 if not for the dumbest and most unnecessary rain delay in the history of baseball.
Well, the Phillies had one of those in the World Series. I want me to cut you off. The Phillies had one.
Oh no. Yeah, I mean, we all have those moments, but be able to take my dad and my mom, for that matter, to Game 6, and you hope it didn't come through. But regardless, I totally get it. Yeah, I cut you off, by the way.
No. And so is that how you grew up? Because you grew up in D.C., but is that how you became a Cleveland fan because of your dad?
So my dad is from Northeast Ohio. Born and raised, actually born in Pennsylvania, but raised in Cleveland, a diehard Cleveland fan. And we used to spend, my brother and I, plenty of summer nights in Cleveland, all our holidays in Cleveland. So we were raised Browns and Indians fans, even though growing up in Northern Virginia at the time, the Redskins, they were called the Redskins then, were winning Super Bowls almost every year, or going deep in the playoffs with Joe Gibbs almost every year. We actually lived out by their facility in Northern Virginia. So you'd see those guys at the grocery store all the time. And that was, the biggest thing in town. Still, it was. But we were raised Browns and Indians fans. And before Sunday Ticket, before the Nationals were there either, we would go to Baltimore to see baseball games.
Sure.
And I would, honest to goodness, every single night for 6 months, when the sun went down roughly at 8:30 in the East in the summer, I'd be able to get in 1100, which back then was 3WE, not WTAM, 1100 in Cleveland. And I would listen to Indians games on the radio every night on my clock radio and then my Walkman.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so, I remember when Jim Tomei left Cleveland to go to the Phillies. That was a huge deal. They were building Citizens Bank Park at the time. And he hung out with the construction workers and just won over the city with this one little moment that was captured on all the news stations. And those moments, you kind of talk about connecting with athletes and players and having these fanboy moments. So many people in the city had that. And I know it probably hurt in Cleveland for him to leave. And that hurt the Indians, the then called Indians. But I just remember that moment going, he's not just one of these athletes. He comes across as a human being. So you grew up a Browns fan. How do you separate that when you're talking about and the Browns have had some very tough years, but how do you separate that? Is there a challenge, or do you still, if you're doing a Brown story, do you still have that moment where you have that extra excitement, in your voice?
Well, the one thing I would say, and I think what's great about working in this business, especially at NFL Network, is we are all fans. So if you turn on game day morning, you're going to hear a little bit more pep from Rich when he's talking about the Jets, right? Whether it's
that's hard to do.
Yeah, I know. Whether it's their ups or their downs, or from Herb with the Cowboys, bless his heart, with his energy, I can't do it. Or Kurt with the Rams, or Mooch with the Niners or the Lions. And we've never, ever been told of the network, don't bring that out.
Right.
Now, I'm doing a news show. I have to make sure I'm not overly biased. It's a little bit different, than a Sunday morning show where they're letting it all hang out. But sure. I could give my opinion a little bit more, and I look at it this way. I feel like I have a little more insight, whether it's the Browns or whether it's the Rams, working for them on the side as well. I feel like I have more knowledge historically and present day about those two franchises. So those two teams for me are the most comfortable to speak about, or the one in Washington as well. But I think it also brings out really good moments where we can give each other some crap because that it means a little bit more. Like even today, Tom Pelissero and I are doing something, and Tom is working from his home studio. He's in Minneapolis, and we went down memory lane from he said, the Vikings haven't run a 3-4 since, whatever, when I was in grade school. And then we started talking about Keith Millard and those teams back in the day and how he was awesome on Tecmo Bowl. So we could all wear our allegiances on our sleeve a little bit. And the other thing is a lot of us work for teams on the side. Like Daniel Jeremiah and Matt Money Smith are the Chargers radio voices, right? MJD is in the Rams booth. I do the Rams as well. Who else? Michael Robinson did the Seahawks this year in the preseason. Over the years, Mayock did the Eagles and then the Vikings before that. Plenty of guys do preseason games. So we all kind of have, our different allegiances as long as you don't go too crazy with it.
Right. And so you say you have maybe a little insight. What are your thoughts with everything going on in Cleveland with the Browns, the quarterback situation, trading away Baker Mayfield, and everything that has gone on right now in Cleveland?
How much time do you have?
Maybe not enough to cover it, but give me the fast food version, perhaps, of what is going on in Cleveland, and really did the Browns expect a suspension of that magnitude? When they made that trade,
they knew there was going to be a suspension, and that it was common knowledge. How long it was going to be, only they can truly answer that. I think it's fair to say they didn't expect 11. I think that's fair to say. They figured it might be a little bit shorter, but they made the trade knowing, because they signed Jacoby Brissett like 48 hours later.
Right.
They made the trade knowing that there would be at least an early part of the season in which he wasn't available. It is a business. John Johnson, the safety, said it again yesterday. It is a business, talking about Baker, how they moved on from Baker. So I am not in any way stunned, surprised that they decided to rip the Band-Aid off. Look at the Colts with Carson Wentz. They said 1 year, we're out. We're good.
Right.
Different circumstances, but I commend the Rams last year. They decided, you know what? Jared Goff took us to a Super Bowl. He actually won a playoff game off the bench in Seattle a couple of months earlier, but we're done. We're making the move. We've made a decision. As a friend of mine likes to say, if it's inevitable, make it immediate. Right? If you've made up your mind, then just do it. Stop fooling yourself. You have a business to run, move on. So they did that with Baker. Could it have been handled slightly better? Yeah, maybe. But they told Baker they were going to look around. They did. Period. That really can't be debated. Did Baker expect them to fly to Houston to talk to Deshaun Watson the next day? Probably not. But they maybe not the next day, but they told him. They looked at the Mahomes and Josh Allen game in the playoffs, right? They looked at what Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow did in the playoffs, and they said, we need one of them. And we're going to, whatever it costs, look what the Rams paid, we're going to go get one of them. I understand the fan backlash in Cleveland and elsewhere about Deshaun Watson. I also like to remind people, and it sounds like I'm an apologist, we report at the time on NFL Network, 12 teams that called the Texans, and said, we want in. We want a seat at the table. 12, including the Colts, by the way. And the Texans told them, no, in division, we're not going to make that trade.
Sure.
So they boiled it down to the 4, the 3 in the NFC South, and the Browns. The Browns won the bidding. They did so with a pretty expensive contract, but they won the bidding. I think it could have been handled by all sides a lot better. I think Deshaun could have given far better answers on multiple podiums he's been on since the trade was made. Here we go. It's week 1.
Is Deshaun Watson, and this comes as a loaded question with all the baggage and everything going on, is that enough of an upgrade, in your opinion, for Cleveland to just rip away from Baker Mayfield that early in his career? I mean, he has shown that he can play.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the answer is an obvious yes. Maybe obvious is too strong. I think all things being equal, and they're not clearly here with the two different scenarios off the field. They're not equal at all. But all things being equal, yeah, Deshaun Watson, you could argue, is a top 6 quarterback. Baker is not. I like Baker a lot. I really do. And if you go back to, I wish you could put 2020 in a bottle and do it again. But you can't. And that season was one they're always going to remember. You're always going to remember blowing the Steelers out in their own building. My neighbors still remember it because of the noise I made. But he played hurt last year. The Odell Beckham Jr. thing happened. There was clearly some division in the locker room, and they made their decision. We are not good enough with him even at his best. So we are moving on. Baker gets a fresh start. I think it's a pretty good spot for him. I really do.
Yeah.
And what do you know? The schedule maker says we're going to put him week 1 against the Browns, although it wasn't, the trade hadn't been done at the time. It almost happened on draft day, by the way. And we're going to put Russell Wilson week 1 against the Seahawks.
Great.
Funny how that works.
Well, look, it's, when you dumb it down, it's entertainment, right? And so that's what this all is. It's live entertainment, and it's a soap opera. I mean, really, and that's how this business is a billion, trillion, whatever it is, dollar business. And so you talk about the quarterbacks, and you have some insight, obviously, doing the Rams preseason games as a play-by-play guy. When you look at what has transpired with the Rams, what has made, in your opinion, Matthew Stafford so successful so early? Because it's really uncommon for guys to be traded in the NFL. It's not the NBA, it's different. For guys to be traded in the NFL and have immediate success, especially at the quarterback position.
So there's a lot there. First of all, Matthew, go back, he was the first overall pick of the draft. He has always been uber talented. He's also to the point in his career, I believe it was 11 years in Detroit, where he had it wasn't going to get any better, right? I mean, they had to rebuild the entire organization, and he is that special a quarterback, and he has that when you combine his arm talent and his veteran experience, and then you throw in Sean McVay with the offensive weapons that they had. It's a beautiful marriage. Yeah. I mean, people want to go back and look at the no-look pass to Cooper in the Super Bowl. He did stuff like that week in, week out. I'm not talking necessarily no-look stuff, but just the above-the-neck stuff, to use Sean McVay parlance here, the way he moved defenders pre-snap, the way he moved defenders as he's getting back to that fifth or that seventh step in his drop. He has an above-the-neck ability that very, very few quarterbacks have. Sean McVay game plans like very few coaches can. Kyle Shanahan certainly can. Right. I mean, there's really an elite level of play caller, and then there's everyone else. When you combine that, it was a beautiful marriage. Now the question is, can you come back and do it again when everyone has you circled on their schedule, and when the Rams have this year, at least statistically, as we open up the season, the most difficult schedule in the NFL.
Yeah, I always think that is so overrated. I mean, I've seen so many times where a couple of years ago, the Eagles had the easiest schedule. When the season kicked off, they did terrible. And then their schedule, by the end of the season, it was out that they had the toughest schedule. And I'm going,
I hear you. I hear you, because we're basing that all on last year's numbers.
Right.
But I'm looking down. It's not that I'm not listening. I'm looking down to pull up the Rams schedule here. So we know they open with the Bills, so that's a would-be Super Bowl preview. Everyone's picking Buffalo to win the whole thing. Then you get Atlanta, you get Arizona, and San Francisco weeks 3 and 4. They were both playoff teams last year. One of them went to the NFC Championship game. Then you get Dallas, Carolina. Anyway, after the bye, they get, in order, the Niners, who have owned them the last 3 years. The Niners, Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, the Saints, Patrick Mahomes, the Seahawks, then Derek Carr, then Aaron Rodgers, then Russell Wilson, then Justin Herbert.
Yeah. I get it. It looks insane. I get it. It looks insane, but the Rams are going to win more than 3 games. I mean, the Rams, I mean, we saw it with the Patriots for years, and I want to compare them to the Patriots, but I mean, are they at a point where they are still going up, where they could be really, really good for a really long time?
I think so, but a lot depends on how well they draft and how much financial flexibility they continue to have. Cooper Kupp re-upped in the offseason. Aaron Donald re-upped in the offseason. I think it's fair to say Aaron has at least 2 more years, possibly a third. That's your window right there. Right. Aaron Donald's window is the Rams' window. Right. That's why they don't mind spending the money now and doing the cap gymnastics to try to get another one, because, and look, in 3 years, Sean McVay may tap out with Aaron Donald. He may go back and he may decide to do TV. He still won't be 40 at that point.
Right. It is crazy to think.
He's still the youngest coach. Kevin O'Connell has him by 8 months. Kevin O'Connell, who came from the Rams staff to go to the Vikings.
Right.
Sean McVay is still entering year 6, the youngest head coach in the NFL.
It's insane. I mean, it's been in his blood forever, And you look at, there's some great coaches out there. There's some great quarterbacks. Who's your early favorite for MVP? You want to say, okay, maybe Aaron Rodgers. Can he go for a three-peat? But who do you like for that MVP? I know it's so early.
Yeah, it's early, and a lot of it I think has to do with team success. Like Aaron Rodgers could certainly be there. If Matt Ryan and the Colts go on a run, then Jonathan Taylor is certainly part of the conversation. I also, there are a lot of people that like Justin Jefferson, but it's never been a wide receiver award.
Right.
The Vikings would have to have this amazing season where they're in the playoffs. Or Justin Jefferson would have to put up a Cooper Kupp-esque season.
Sure.
Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown and didn't win the MVP.
Right.
So it's just hard as a wide receiver. Nick Chubb could run for 1,800 yards. I think it's unlikely because they have such a deep backfield, they'll limit his carries. But without Deshaun Watson and with Jacoby Brissett as your quarterback, they're going to run and run and run and run and run. If the Chargers look great, Justin Herbert could be your guy as well. I mean, Justin Herbert has thrown, like 87 touchdowns or something in 2 years? I mean, that's insane. And don't discount Joe Burrow.
No, and you talk about Joe Burrow and you talk about Cincinnati and you look at the AFC, or the Bengals the favorites, or the Bills the favorites, and you look at...
Oh, yeah, there's Josh Allen. He could win the MVP.
Yeah, and so you think about like, wow, the Bengals are good. The Browns are supposed to be good. The Bills, you're like, what year is this? Because, the last 20 years, those teams have been terrible. They've been terrible. And, it seems like the tide has shifted.
I think it's good. I love it. And if you want to bring me a 1989 Browns-Bills divisional playoff rematch, where it goes down to the wire and Clay Matthews picks off Jim Kelly on the goal line with, 10 seconds left after Ronnie Hartman had dropped the ball in the previous time, I'm all for that.
Right.
Football is, and I truly do mean this, and I live in LA. The Rams won the Super Bowl, and I'm happy for it. But I think football is better when teams like Buffalo, Cleveland, Green Bay, smaller towns, Rust Belt towns. I know Green Bay is not a Rust Belt town. Cincinnati last year, not that everything needs to flow through a smaller market, but those teams have history. Yes, the Bills have never won the Super Bowl. Great, I get it. Okay. They have an amazing fan base and a proud history. If anyone has the chance to go to Bills training camp, it's in Pittsford, outside of Rochester, which is an hour east of Buffalo. It's as good a training camp and a setup at St. John Fisher as anywhere. Yeah, it's so cool. And
Sean McDermott has done an amazing job. I mean, he's done an incredible job there to turn that around. Bills fans, I mean, they're dying for a Super Bowl. They came so close for so many years, and then it was just awful for 2 decades.
And I hope they get it back. They are back, first of all.
Sure, they are.
As exciting a team as there is in the NFL. But they are primed to win, especially after the disappointment last year. Look, as a Browns fan as a kid, 86, 87, 89, they got to the AFC Championship game in 3 or 4 years. Right, that including knocking the Bills out in '89. Well, not the championship game, but the game before. I get that heartbreak. You feel like every year is your year, and then you get kicked in the face again. So for their sake, I hope the Bills can taste success because their fan base deserves it.
Yeah, and you talk about all these teams. You talk about the MVP. One name we did not mention, Tom Brady. And so he's retired. He's unretired. He's coming back. Everyone's going, what's going on with Tom Brady this year? But you can never count that guy out and everything he's done. And he would love, if he is going to go out this year, to go out on top.
He would. I can't figure them out yet. And a lot of it has to do with the offensive line. A lot of it has to do, I just don't get, it's going to sound crazy. I don't have a feeling that this team is as good as it thinks it is.
But Brady's always the guy that takes those, because you think about the Patriots, a couple years they had some star receivers, but they never really had these household receivers but he's so good at just getting the ball out and making the simple play.
He makes everyone around him better. The great quarterbacks are separated by their ability to make everyone around them better.
Right.
He's the ultimate in that regard. There comes a point, though, where he actually has to play his age. And we've been saying, oh, it's going to happen. Oh, no, it isn't. This year, it might happen if the offensive line can't protect him. If Julio Jones can't stay healthy, which he hasn't for the last 2 years, right? Chris Godwin isn't going to be back for much of September. I know he's practicing this week without the brace, but he's not going to be the same guy, at least not the first half of the season. You don't have Gronk. Does he show his age? It's a blessing and a curse here. It's a blessing that we actually see Brady be human, I think, where he actually talks about being 45 and having, other stuff in his life weighs on him. He's human. We're all human. But does he act human on the field this year? And then does it get ugly? I'm not saying it will, but does it get ugly when people say, well, Tom, maybe if you hadn't ducked out for 10 days, which will be unfair, but maybe are you not focused enough? I just have I hope it doesn't go badly, but part of me has a fear that it may go bad.
Right. Sometimes staying at the party a little too long. But having said that, what he's been able to do is just flat out, for a lack of a better term, ridiculous.
Yeah. No one else can or will do it. Ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the Bucs, you're just unsure what they look like. I mean, look, new coach as well. And does Todd Bowles have experience? Of course he does. Will things be drastically different? Probably not. And, look, it's still Tom Brady's team. He'll do what he has to do.
Yeah. And they will win enough games to be in the playoff conversation down the stretch. I just don't have, I don't know. When people say, oh, they're going to be in the Super Bowl, I don't see it. Now, I mean, they have Tom Brady, sure, but I think the Packers are a better team. I think the Rams are a better team. I just do. The Rams went down there and beat them last year. Eventually, it has to come to an end. The question is, did it come to an end last year? And is this just holding on too long? I don't know. Yeah.
Last thing for you. We're going to circle right back. What is your favorite part of your day? Is it hosting the shows? Is it doing play-by-play for Rams preseason games? Talking on the radio? Favorite part of your job during the day?
That's a loaded question because it's like, hey, who's your favorite kid? I don't have kids for the record, but I would say that the most fun I have is on Sundays. And for the last, this will be our 18th season. For the last 18 years, that has been at DirecTV doing the Red Zone channel. And that is a thrill unlike any other. Sure. It is pure, I'm drinking caffeine late in the afternoon, is pure caffeine into your veins for 7 consecutive hours. And I can't think of a better job. I love calling games. That's in my heart. I wish I could call more. But on Sundays, I'm the luckiest guy on earth because I get to call, in essence, every game at once.
Right.
And at 1 o'clock on Sunday, September 11th, 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific, we're going to have 9 games on. And I'm going to be pacing like a madman in front of a wall of TV, screaming and yelling. And it's going to be awesome. And I live for those Sundays.
Well, I think all the fans, all the viewers out there, feed off your energy. Love watching you. Keep up the great work. I appreciate you joining me.
Hey, Jeff, I'll say this at the end here. I couldn't do it on Sunday without an amazing crew. It sounds so cliche, but we've been around most of our crew for most of those 18 years all together. And it is you work in TV, you know how hard it is to juggle 10 feeds at once in a control room, listening to back hauls and trying to figure out who and when people are going to break and trying to get me information about, well, who's challenging what in Philly, for example. We have an amazing crew, and thank God for them because my energy flows from them back to those fans. So it's awesome on Sundays. And thank you for your patience with me, to arrange this.
Oh my God, of course. I appreciate you joining me. Great insight to what's going on, your career, and everything going on in the NFL. I appreciate it.
Of course. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. Great catching up with NFL Network host Andrew Siciliano. Always a great follow on Twitter and, of course, on the air weekly on NFL Network and NFL Sunday. Red Zone Ticket on DirecTV, of course, in the booth during Rams preseason games. If you like the show, click subscribe at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you like the show and want to check out what's coming up next, hit the alert button. We'll send you alerts the next time we drop an episode. You can also listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all your favorite podcast apps. Just click on the link in the description below to find everything you need. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm Jeff Skversky for Inside the Huddle, presented by Sportskeeda.